lounge. This is the beginning of our heavy-duty astronomical programming. Instead of just talking about what we're going to talk about, we're actually going to talk about it. First up this afternoon.
Okay, today I'm going to talk about the Solar and Heliospheric Observatory and how it's solving long-standing mysteries of the Sun from its deep interior to its tenuous outer atmosphere. And to do that, I'm going to put on this overhead transparency the key points of my talk. And then as the talk progresses, I'll use this screen to show the diagrams and slides and other material, supporting material. So to begin with, SOHO. So you can't read it? Oh dear. Pardon? Okay, I'll tell you what it says also. How's that? And next time, before the next time, we'll have the projector move further away. Essentially, SOHO is an acronym for Solar and Heliospheric Observatory. It's a joint... Is that good? Okay, we're going to start over right now. Okay, rewind. My 45 minutes begins now. SOHO is a $1 billion spacecraft launched by NASA in a joint project with ESA, the European Space Agency, and NASA. It was launched on December 2nd, 1995, began full operation on Valentine's Day in 1996, so it's been operating non-stop with an unblinking stare at the Sun for more than 2 years. It's unblinking and continuous and uninterrupted because SOHO is 1% of the way towards the Sun, where the gravity of the Earth and the Sun exactly balance. And the spacecraft can go around the Sun with the Earth and not orbit the Earth. All other previous solar spacecraft have orbited the Earth and had the view of the Sun blocked by the Earth periodically in the orbit. If you want to get more information about the spacecraft, it's at this worldwide, and all its results, its images and its scientific results, it's at this worldwide web address, http://soho, SOHOWWW, right here, nascom.nasa.gov. Since this might be hard for some of you to read, I've got a written version of this talk I brought with me, and I'll try to get, when you ask for it, I'll try to get copies made for you. The three main scientific goals of NASA's SOHO mission are to study the internal structure and dynamics of the Sun, to study the outer corona, the heating mechanisms for its million-degree corona, an unsolved mystery, and to investigate the wind, the eternal wind from the Sun that flows from the Sun to the Earth and beyond. So to begin, solving unseen depths of the Sun, the first part of the lecture. It's a new science called helioseismology, helio for the Sun, seismo for Quaker tremor, and then logos for logic, trying to understand the Sun and the inside of the Sun. In this lecture, which I'll go through quickly here, because there's so much more supporting material, is that we see the inside of the Sun by looking at sound waves trapped within it. The sound waves can't get out from inside the Sun. They reverberate inside it, they resonate, and they resonate to different depths. So by looking at, in fact, different sound waves, we can probe the Sun to different depths and reconstruct its interior. The same mechanism is used in reconstructing images of your brain with a CAT scan. You essentially send X-rays to your brain and recollect the images that went to different depths and make a map of your brain. So we see those sound waves by watching the Sun pulse in and out. The Sun pulsates with a period of about 5 minutes, and it does so all over the surface of the Sun. SOHO's Michelson Doppler imager instrument does that at 1 million points across the surface of the Sun. At 1 million different points, it's mapping the in and out motions of the Sun every minute, 1,000,000 times every minute. It does that by the well-known Doppler effect. The Doppler effect is what causes a siren on an ambulance to change its pitch as it comes towards you and moves away. It's due to the motion of the ambulance, even though it's the same siren. Well, the motion of the sun's surface causes some radiation lines, spectral lines, to change in wavelength, and by observing that very accurately at 1,000,000 points, you can sort out all of the sounds that are trapped inside the sun. And so it's doing that. It's been doing it for 2 years. In fact, I'll show you some images that are made from 1 year of continuous data. Okay, so that's the Doppler effect. Mind it, non-stop. Where do the sounds come from? As you track your way out from the center of the sun towards the surface, the radiation hits an opaque layer where it generates a boiling motion in what's called the convection zone. It's exactly analogous to your boiling water for tea or coffee on your stove. Okay? The hot gas rises and cool gases fall, so the entire outer shell of the sun is boiling. The boiling makes a noise. The noise is similar to the noise of your teapot or your boiling water when it hisses, or your teapot when it makes a noise. Or another analogy is a jet airplane. The loud noise of a jet airplane when it takes off is just the convective turbulence of the jet aircraft blowing out noise. The sun is making similar noises, and the only difference is that it's trapped inside the sun. The sun can't get out because the rarefied gas is too tenuous to propagate sound. And even if it could propagate through the sound, you couldn't hear it because it's about 12 octaves below the lowest note you can hear. That's sort of logical. The sun's big, so it's going to resonate with a very low sound. Okay, so I'm going to put this over here for those of you who can see that part of it. And I'll make, because that's the only thing I can do right now, and go on with the diagrams. So what we watch are sound waves. Sound waves generated near the surface of the sun and going to different depths. The shallower ones hit the surface more frequently, and the deeper ones less frequently. And by watching around the surface here, moving in and out each time the sound wave hits the surface, you can unravel the motions of all the sound waves inside the sun. Now, not all the sounds continue. Some die out and some are amplified and build up. Only certain sounds with, looks better this way. Only certain sounds with certain combinations of periods and sizes resonate inside the sun. The analogy here is to pushing a swing. If you push a swing randomly in its trajectory, okay, your child say, the kid jerks around. But if when the swing comes back, each time it comes back and you push the swing at the same point in its orbit, in its swing, right, you amplify the swing's motion. The kid moves out further. The same thing's happening on the sun. Those that hit the surface of the sun at the same place over and over again build up and amplify and grow. And those are the ones you see. And to prove that, you map out the sizes in thousands of kilometers as a function of their period in minutes, around 5 minutes. And you see that only certain combinations of those occur, and those are the resonant combinations in the cavities inside the sun. Now, if any of you are experimentalists, you'll enjoy this picture, which is from the MDI spacecraft, showing other actual measurements. They use more technical language, frequency and wave number, but it's the same thing, size and period. And these are the measurements they made. And this symbol here is 1,000 times the uncertainty in measurement. So they know it very accurately and very well. Well, what do they see? The first thing that they measure is the speed of sound inside the sun. Okay, you're watching sound waves, so you measure their speed. And to a very high degree of accuracy, they see the sound speed that they would predict. The speed of a sound wave increases with its temperature. So the wave moves faster as it goes deeper inside the hotter interior of the sun. In fact, that's why it bends out again, because the front part of the wave moves faster than the back and it bends around. What you can do is make a model and predict the sound speed inside the sun and compare it to that that's observed. And the comparison agrees now to better than 0.2%, okay, to a very high accuracy. But where there's disagreements, it's important. And these are two places. On this scale, it's the difference in the speed of sound plotted as a function of solar radius. So this is at the surface of the sun, this is at the core, and this is halfway in between. Well, about 7/10 of the way down is the bottom of that convection zone. That's where you see a discrepancy. And further down, right on the edge of the energy generating core of the sun, is another discrepancy. Both places are where turbulent mixing is channeling the material in and out across those boundaries. Okay. Another way of portraying the same result is in this form, where color denotes differences, and you get a difference going in the sun at the convection zone, and then down here at the boundary of the core of the sun, where all the energy is generated. Now, we've known for about 3 centuries that the different parts of the sun rotate at different speeds. At the equator, the sun rotates relatively fast. At the equator of the sun, here, the sun is rotating once in about 25 days. At higher latitudes, towards the poles on either side, the sun rotates slower and progressively slower in between. So it goes longer and longer time to complete one circuit around the sun. It's always 24 hours for the sun to speed, so your day is the same length anywhere on the surface of the earth. But on the surface of the sun, it's different. We've known that for a long time. What we haven't known is what the rotation speed is inside the sun. And unexpectedly, no one predicted this, the rotation speed is differential in the sense that it changes from equator to pole systematically all the way from the from the visible surface of the sun down to the bottom of the convection zone. And it's only below that area that the sun starts to spin as a solid body, where all of the parts of the sun spin at the same speed. And we think that this interface, okay, which is also one of the interfaces of the turbulent mixing, is the place where the magnetism of the sun is generated. Another way of looking at that is in this overlay, which shows the plot of the, as a function of sun radius, the period of rotation in days at the equator and at high latitudes and in between being differential and then joining to the same speed further down, deeper inside the sun, the heart of the sun. Okay, I'd like to show a few slides that illustrate this. Okay, this first slide is just meant to remind you of the ingredients of the internal structure of the sun: an energy generating core of about 15.6 million degrees, a radiation zone in which the radiation works its way out in about 170,000 years to this boiling convective layer just under the part of the sun you see. Now, outside that part are magnetically controlled features such as prominences and the corona you'll see during your eclipse. Let's go. We're going to flip right through these to get to the beginning of, there we go. Now, if you were to imagine what you think the sun looks like, it looks like a sphere, and then if you plotted some coordinates on the surface of that sphere, they'd look something like that, spherical coordinates. But what actually happens in dramatized form is that the sun moves in and out, something like that. And the way we see that is to look at the colors of the light from the sun at different places. And in this portrayal, the red light is moving away from us and the blue light is moving towards us because of that Doppler effect. Okay? And that's what these guys are watching all the time. Now, some very recent discoveries have to do with moving rivers of fire, we call them, motions below the surface of the sun detected with the rotation removed. The rotation is a very fast speed. You take that out, and what do you see? Well, you see fine detail that you cannot see from the surface of this Earth, and you see jet streams, you see equatorial winds, and so on. And rather than bother you with these details, I'll put them over here and illustrate them. Subtler details of motions inside the sun. In both North and South Pole, there are jet streams analogous to those on the Earth, circling the inside of the sun. They're subsurface, they're below the surface of the sun, spinning around near the poles. At the equators, these yellow bands, here and here and here, are moving faster than the surrounding areas. So they're analogous to the trade winds in the surface of the Earth, and they're spinning around this way at a faster speed than the neighboring gas. And the entire sun, the entire outer layers of the sun are moving inside the sun from the equator to the poles in two gigantic cells. Let's turn this around. Let's put it this way. Okay, these are contour plots of the motion going from, actually from the equator to pole and back down again, equator to pole and back down again. The whole surface of the sun then, in addition to spinning, is going towards the poles, and we think cycling back inside. Now, one of the most exciting results for me is plotting the subsurface motion and comparing it to the magnetism of the sun. The reason is that it explains why sunspots exist. You see sunspots with their eye, they're dark places. They're dark because the magnetism darkens the sun. It darkens it because it blocks, but wherever you found dark places, you see the arrows pushing and mashing and holding the magnetism together to make the sunspots. So it's internal flows within the sun that are holding the magnetism together to make the sunspots. Okay, the second set of discoveries by Soho has to do with what I call solving the heating crisis. Okay. We have a normally invisible gas, a tenuous gas called the corona, that's 1,000,000 degrees hot. It overlies the visible surface of the sun that's only 5,780 degrees hot. So the corona is 100 times hotter than the underlying gas, and that's from something cold. Okay, it violates the second law of thermodynamics. It violates common sense. Nobody could explain it. Nobody has been able to completely explain it for half a century. Okay, radiation doesn't work. Radiation passes right through the corona without depositing any energy into it. That's the reason why we don't see the corona except during an eclipse. Okay, because the amount of light that's scattered in that gas is very low. What might work is motion. Motion can make energy that goes from cold to hot, or magnetic fields. Okay. So I call that pumping. Solutions to this paradox are called pumping up the corona. Radiation doesn't work. And one peculiar anomaly that was really brought home by the Soho spacecraft is that layer between the corona and the photosphere, which we call the chromosphere, the part that's colored during your eclipse when you see it, okay, colored rose color. Every time you look at that layer, you don't see anything moving out, it's all falling down. All the Doppler measurements in the transition region between the very hot place and the cold place, wherever you see anything, it's not going out into the corona, it's falling into the sun. It's as if nothing can hold it up. Okay? So you can't see anything that could possibly be making the corona hot, let alone supplying energy for it, as we'll soon see, to flow out into space. Okay. So if you can't see it, you have to use invisible techniques. Okay. one way to see the invisible corona is through X-rays. And the thing that's brought home is that the corona is just filled. It's almost nothing but magnetized loops. Loops of magnetism that constrain and hold in the hot gas. And it's the interactions of these magnetic loops that ignite and trigger tremendous explosions, explosions equivalent to millions of atomic bombs in sizes as large as the Earth on the surface of the sun. And so somehow the energy stored in the magnetism that wins, it sort of holds things together and it wins the fight against the hot gas. It's that magnetism that we think fuels the tremendous explosions on the sun. And as we'll soon see, it's probably what's heating the corona as well. And one of the new things is that even when you look away from the active sun in periods of quiescent, relative quiet, you see that quiet is a misnomer. There's no such thing as a quiet sun. The sun is always boiling away. It's always in a turbulent state, and it's always moving. In fact, I like to think that if you don't move, you're dead. You know, that if you don't just keep moving, in general, everything moves. We move all around, okay? The Earth moves around the sun, and everything is in a state of motion, and almost nothing isn't. It's almost a byproduct of existence and a definition of it in a way. But this motion, this ever-changing surface of the sun is blinking. And it's blinking, releasing magnetic energy and fueling the sun. And we're going to go into that in just a moment. Look at the sun with SOHO, for example, we'll see these magnetized loops on the edge of the sun holding in the hot gas and sometimes erupting. But the other part that we're just beginning to realize, all this other part here, that's patchy, that's not uniform. Those are all little magnetic dipoles, little magnetic loops, each changing, interacting, converging, merging, annihilating, and supplying energy. This picture is a picture from a spacecraft, from another spacecraft, the Yoko spacecraft. And I want to point out two features of this picture, this image. One is the dark places, so-called holes. They're called holes because there's a hole because the hole doesn't contain anything. Well, it does contain something, but it's not very hot and it's not very dense. So there's this low density place at the poles, a hole, and also this pole, and sometimes in between. Okay? Then near the equator, there are these places in which magnetism constrains the hot gas, and in some places some very odd magnetism. Okay, you see how that's not just a little loop, that's a contorted loop. That contortion is generating energy. It's generating electric currents. It's sort of like a space heater. Well, in the tremendous explosions, they look something like this. You take a magnetized loop on the sun, and when the loops interact, two opposing some magnetism might be pointing out of the sun and some in. When they meet each other, they join because they're opposite signs, opposite polarity. They join, they merge together, and they release energy. The energy is usually released at the tops of these loops to produce what we commonly call solar flares, and higher up what's commonly called coronal mass ejections. Energy that's sent hurling particles and high energy radiation towards the Earth, where it can cause a lot of damage. It can kill an astronaut, for example, if the astronaut's in outer space at the wrong time. It can compress the Earth's magnetic field and wipe out satellites that are orbiting the Earth. So there's some serious consequences of explosions on the sun, and for that reason we're trying to understand why they occur so we might predict them. Such explosions, we think, are fueled by stored magnetic energy and triggered by the interactions of magnetism. Well, why am I talking about that in the context of heating the sun? Perhaps the best way to show that is to show the first little bit of the video. Could I have the first, Maggie, the first video clip? Okay, here. Turn the sound off, please. Okay, just no sound. Okay, this is the white and black are different pieces of the, can you rewind that? Could you stop it? And rewind it. What you're going to see is black and white, different parts of magnetism on the surface of the sun. We see the obvious sunspots. What we haven't known before is that the whole surface of the sun is peppered with this opposite polarized magnetism. And I'm just going to show you a quick clip. Could you do that? Okay. Just go through that little bit there. It's going to show you that zooming in on the surface of the sun, little tiny sunspots, things much smaller than normal sunspots, interacting, changing, merging, and so on all the time. Okay, thank you. And in totality, showing this white, pearly white thing we call the corona. That mysterious thing, which is constrained by the solar magnetism. Okay, there's streamers near the equator of the sun, confined by the solar's magnetism, but open magnetism near the poles. I suspect that will be somewhat similar to what we'll see in the next stage. And when we look at X-rays, we see an entirely different sun. The holes are open, they're empty. And this is the source, as Soho has shown Ulysses, of the fast winds that flow out towards the Earth. And then the hottest gas is constrained by the most intense magnetism. That's not an accident. It's the strong magnetic fields that are holding in the hot gas, the pressurized gas. Okay. And this is just to remind you that the way we detect the magnetism is by looking at spectral lines and seeing the splitting of a spectral line would normally be at just one wavelength. And it's split into three components by the presence of magnetism in sunspots, and to a lesser amount by weaker magnetism all over the sun. When you focus in detail at the X-ray sun, you see that there are very fine magnetic loops holding in the gas. Such loops are seen at the limb by the Soho spacecraft at ultraviolet and extreme ultraviolet wavelengths. And why from space? You can't see these things from the ground. X-rays don't penetrate the Earth's atmosphere. The Earth's atmosphere absorbs them, and it absorbs most of the ultraviolet. Otherwise, we get skin cancer instead of sunburns. Okay, so you need a Soho spacecraft up there tuned to these essentially invisible wavelengths to see the details of the corona and understand why it's so hot. That's the game. Why is the sun so hot? Okay? And also to understand why it explodes. And this is an X-ray picture just after an explosion showing that the sun's magnetism is regrouping into a stable loop-like structure after an explosion. That the magnetism has reconnected, so to speak, after the release of powerful energy. This is a combination of a radio picture and X-ray negative showing an explosion going off from the sun and the magnetism regrouping in arcades of stable loops. And this is meant to remind you that all over the surface of the sun, not just at the dramatic places where there's sunspots and exploding loops, as you see here, but all over the surface of the sun, there's these hot spots. And the hot spots are blinking on and off, energized by ever-changing magnetism. Okay, the third part of our lecture has to do with the solar wind, the eternal winds from the sun. Essentially, they're due to the fact that the corona is hot. It's hot, so it has to expand. It expands and accelerates like water flowing over a dam. Okay, the released energy, it speeds up. It escapes the gravitational grasp of the sun and also the magnetic grasp. You get far enough away from the sun, and the sun just can't hold on to the hot gas. It flows out into a solar wind that's been an anomaly, something that we couldn't explain the exact sources of or the acceleration mechanisms of, until the modern day. Okay. Well, there's a difference in the magnetism on the sun. There's the places that are open, where the wind can flow freely, like a fast lane and a highway, or the places where the magnetism is closed and the wind is constrained. Ulysses, as shown in a minute, both Ulysses and SOHO have shown that the slow parts of the solar wind, which move at about 400 kilometers per second, come from the constrained part, from the magnetized loops, from the streamers, from these parts. And the fast winds come from the open parts, from the coronal holes, from the places where the magnetism allows an unimpeded flow. Okay, so let me go through the details of the wind. Well, let me show just one more overlay here from SOHO. What SOHO has been able to do is it's one of the instruments on SOHO resolves the magnetism on the visible surface. And that magnetism is shown as black for one direction, moving out, say, and white for another direction, moving in. Well, wherever there's magnetism moving out and moving in, it's joined by magnetic loops, sort of like bridges joining magnetic islands in a river. Okay, so this, you can model what the loops look like, and they'll look like these structures joining all over the sun, these magnetic islands. But as I showed you in the video, the magnetic islands are moving around all the time. They're coming and going, they're moving, and they're interacting. And that's interaction, which is thought to fuel and to heat the solar corona in much the same way that the more intense explosions are ignited. So my last topic is going to be the eternal solar winds. The million-degree corona expands forever to make the winds. There's two components. That's been known for a long time, for a couple of decades, by different spacecraft. A fast uniform one at about 750 kilometers per second, and a slow variable wind at about half that speed. Now, the Ulysses spacecraft, which was the first spacecraft to pass over the poles of the sun, has definitely confirmed that the fast wind comes from the poles, the holes, and the slow wind from the equator. I want to say two things about that result. One is Ulysses. There's no spacecraft that we build here on Earth that's powerful enough to fly over to be hurled, to be sent, to fly over the poles of the sun. All the spacecraft we've sent out into space so far have been shot out along the Earth's equator. There's a reason for that. The Earth's spinning. So the spin of the Earth gives a boost. It shoves the spacecraft on its way, gives it a little extra energy. Well, but there's not enough energy. It's in the equator, so it doesn't have enough energy to get out and go over the sun's poles. The way they did it with Ulysses is a marvelous idea. What they did was they sent the spacecraft to Jupiter first. Okay? The spacecraft went to Jupiter. Jupiter's mass was borrowed to sling the spacecraft above the sun. Okay? It's like a slingshot. Just whirl it up above the sun, and then it's been going around the sun from pole to pole. The second thing is what is shown is that the fast speed wind comes from those open coronal holes, as everyone suspected, but they've true. And the slow one comes from the equator. Now what SOHO has shown is that the equatorial streamers, those closed magnetized regions, are always spurting out material in blobs that move out to make the slow wind. I was trying to think of an analogy, and I thought of two. One is the way water flows through a beaver dam. It doesn't, the flow of the water is blocked, but it still dribbles through. Same thing happens when your sink is clogged, right? There's something that impedes the flow, but it doesn't keep it going altogether out. That's what's happening in the streamers. That's what I think is happening, something similar. And what's happening in the poles, where the fast wind continues unabated, is there's nothing to block it. It's just opened up. There's nothing there. Okay, well what we see at the pole is something I call Some Like It Hot. is truly amazing. What SOHO has done is it's measured the speeds of particles of different mass in these open regions. An amazing thing is that the heaviest ones move with much faster speeds. If the lightest known substance, hydrogen, is moving at about 100 kilometers per second, then the heavier ones, like oxygen, say, is moving at 5 times that speed. That's not normal. You don't expect a heavier person to run faster down a track, right? That's what's happening out there. Why is that happening? It's non-thermal. It's bizarre. It's abnormal. And again, magnetism comes to the rescue. It's the magnetism in the holes that's serving as an accelerator, a particle accelerator, that works very similar to those on the ground. You know, these big man-made particle accelerators where people generate particles at very high velocities. Well, that's what's happening up on top of the sun, causing these very massive particles to go at unheard of speeds. So what we see then, up there above, when we look at the sun in eclipse, is we see the slow wind coming out of these streamers, perhaps along their edges and out into space, and the fast wind streaming out of the poles. If you look at the overall magnetic structure of the sun, beyond those loops, okay, it has a normal dipolar structure similar to that of the Earth. So you have a North Pole and a South Pole, and in between the dipolar structure, it looked like the dotted line, the dashed lines. But there's a wind. The wind is pulling the magnetism out and causing it to be channeled into these streamers. It was hurled first from the Earth in 1990, past Jupiter, and then flung above the South Pole of the Sun and continued back around the North Pole, and it'll complete that trajectory, still up there, as SOHO is, as Yoko is. All 3 spacecraft built together take a concerted view of the Sun, a combined view of the Sun during the next maximum in solar activity. And what Ulysses saw in this overlay is the wind speed is about 800 kilometers per second all the way around here, okay, except at the equator where it comes down to about 400, and that's right where the streamers are. SOHO looks at similar things, and this is a combined picture, put it this way. Okay, the bottom picture is an ultraviolet picture. Well, they're both ultraviolet pictures in different places. This is near the surface of the sun, showing a coronal hole going from the poles down through the sun in the bright spots all over the sun. It probably heat the corona. And then this black ring, what's happening? There we go. This black ring marks the edge of an occulting disk that blocks out the light of the sun, and lets you see the outer parts of the corona where these abnormal velocities are being measured. This is from a yet unpublished results. I'll just put it out to show you that if you looked at the speed of the particles as a function of their distance from the sun and the radii of the sun, okay, so out of the few solar radii, the oxygen is already up to several hundred kilometers per second, and the lighter hydrogen is at a much slower speed. That's an amazing result. And that's a hole. And in a streamer, the speed is much slower. Okay. In a streamer, there's no difference between the fast and slow particles, and they get up to speed much slower. So in the poles, where the speed difference is, and there's these magnetic fields accelerating the particles, but there's also an unimpeded flow, and my analogy there is the particles break away from the sun like horses at a race. Okay, they're just waiting to get burst out. What am I doing here? Okay, yeah. So in summary, before I show a few more slides for the future, as far as SOHO is concerned, it's already fulfilled many of its scientific objectives. Okay? It's shown how internal rotation varies inside the sun. It had previously unsuspected currents of gas, of fire, rivers of fire flowing inside the sun, the jet streams, the trade winds, and the equator to pole where it flows. It's shown that ever-changing magnetism all over the surface of the sun, even in quiet times, shapes, molds, and constrains the corona, and that interacting magnetism may help, and most likely does, heat the corona, making it 1,000,000 degrees hot in ways we never realized before. The fast wind is accelerated very near the sun in the open holes, where the heavier ions move at faster speeds, and the magnetic waves are also found. And that the variable slower wind puffs out of the coronal streamers and takes a longer time to speed up. Well, there's an epilogue to the whole story, and that is that the SOHO, Ulysses, and Yoko spacecraft are all in orbit now. They're all funded to observe the sun through the turn of the millennium. At that time, the sun's magnetism will change from a relatively quiescent state to a much more active one. We'll be able to see these explosions that jeopardize and threaten the Earth, the so-called space weather, much better with these three spacecraft, and they're poised to study it. And as a further epilogue, our civilization, as it becomes more and more dependent on satellites in orbit about the Earth, communication satellites, for example, and outward space motions become more and more vulnerable to what we call space weather. Let me show just one example from SOHO, an amazing example that no one ever expected. There on the edge of the sun, this is a LASCO coronagraph. The light of the sun's being blocked out, and you're seeing an ejection of mass from the edge of the sun. Okay, that's at 0538 their time, which is some universal time. Okay, 0538. That side of the sun, you see a mass ejection. Here's an amazing thing. Less than 10 hours later, on the other side of the sun, a mass ejection occurs. So these ejections from the sun, these powerful ones that go to the Earth and compress the Earth's magnetic field, are occurring globally, all around the sun. Could I show the next video, please? And then I'll go one more over that. This is just going to go very fast from another larger, longer video. SOHO's LASCO. The amazing thing is that you then see them over here and all around the sun. Okay, that's enough time. Okay, that's enough of that. Now, for further information, I've written some articles about this that you might care to read. The latest, the most recent one about SOHO and the Secrets of the Sun is an expanded, updated version of one I did in Scientific American. The Scientific American article was in March of 1997, and this month, released February 24th, so in the month of March, when you go home, Scientific American is going to have a book, a tiny booklet, a magazine essentially, called The Magnificent Cosmos. And in that will be an updated version of many of the things I've been talking to you about. Two other articles, Unsolved Mysteries of the Sun, Parts 1 and 2, have occurred in past issues of Sky and Telescope magazine. And then there's the book Sun and Earth and Sky, which I hope you will all look at It's a good book, you'll like it. Okay, so we'll stop and open up for questions.
Thanks very much, Ken. I know that I'm certainly going to have a different appreciation for the corona during the eclipse than I would have had we not had that electrifying description of the sun's magnetic personality.
That's good.
Okay, we have a question up here.
Oh,
Can you repeat the question, please?
Yeah, the question was, he said, well, the noise that is causing the sun to move in and out and distort its shape from the symmetrical one, I should have mentioned that, thank you for asking it. What's the magnitude of the displacements and the motions? The motions can be hundreds of, is that right? I'll make sure, but I think it's up to 100 kilometers in extent. And I'm certain of the speeds. The speeds are up to just tens of meters in speed for individual oscillations. The NDI can measure the speeds down to a millimeter per second. Incredibly accurate speeds. So the velocities are meters per second, and the magnitudes when combined, when they, there's all these oscillations going on, and sometimes they combine and amplify and make bigger excursions than normal. And the biggest ones will be tens of meters. Yeah. Other questions?
Question
Yes.
down here?
Are the magnetic loops that we saw here identical to the prominence type loops?
Yes, they are.
Can you repeat the question, Ken?
Yeah, excuse me. The question was, are the magnetic loops we see similar to those of the prominence? The corona is nothing but magnetized loops, and they come in different sizes. A prominence is a big loop. Okay? And it's essentially a big magnetized loop. Anchored in the photosphere, distances spread far apart. The smaller loops within individual active regions, which mostly are what you saw, they're the same thing, a very similar thing, except that they're within active regions where the gas is hotter. So prominence, which is also called a filament when it's on the surface of the sun, has relatively cool gas, around 10,000 degrees, as opposed to the million-degree corona, and looks dark against the surface of the sun and only bright at the solar limb. But in terms of magnetism, it's very similar. What it's constraining is a little different. Please, yes.
Do we know anything about the return part, the hidden part of the magnetic loop, since we don't have magnetic monopoles?
That's a very good question, and we don't. I'm delighted you asked that question. I wish I had the proper picture to show you, but I'll do it in my mind's eye. Imagine that the sun is not a monopole, but it's a big dipole, but that most of the magnetism is hidden inside the sun, running from north to south. Okay? Or south to north, whatever you prefer. Anyway, the magnetism loops through the sun. Okay? But the inside of the sun is spinning. And it's spinning differentially. So what it's doing is it's pulling that interior magnetism around inside the sun. And as time goes on, it tightens it up, constricts it into ropes. And those ropes, those tightened up, spun up, twisted magnetism pop out of the surface of the sun. So what's happening is the magnetism comes down inside the sun, it pops out, it loops around to the part we see, goes back in, and continues, pops out again, goes in, and continues down up through the other pole. Yeah.
I knew you knew your ropes about the sun, Ken.
Yeah. There's one here.
The material that's ejected, the constant
Right.
where does that go?
Can you repeat the
That's
question,
it,
Ken?
yes. Good question. What? The question is, the material that's ejected from the sun as the solar wind, where does it go? Well, the solar wind, it doesn't go back to the sun. The sun is always throwing out this plastic material in all directions. And it continues unimpeded to carve out a domain much larger than the planets called the heliosphere, the sphere of the sun's influence. where it dominates all the charged particles and motions and other things in space. Eventually, it's diluted with distance, right? Because it thins out. The further you go out, the more tenuous it gets and the more diluted it becomes. Eventually, its strength is weakened enough that interstellar forces can hold it back and stop it. So it ends in interstellar space, say halfway to the nearest star that might also have a wind, okay, where they hit. Okay? And in fact, we think we've measured that by signals from explosions on the sun. They send out radio signals that go past distant spacecraft, the Voyager spacecraft. The spacecraft detects the radio signal, then they detect another signal later when the shock waves traveling past the spacecraft hit this wall between our heliosphere, our sun's wind, in interstellar winds, and generate noise. And from the time lag and the known speed, you can see how far away that is. And I think it's the number is around 116 astronomical units, 100 times the mean distance between the Earth and the Sun. It's a better lecture if I just have you guys ask questions. Yeah. Yeah, please. Yeah.
The question was how much mass is thrown out.
Yeah, it's a good question. Let me say that the sun is blowing itself away, but there's plenty of material there for it to last a long time. It's not going to disintegrate by throwing out its material. It's going to stop burning its fuel in the usual way well before that, but that's a long time, 5 billion years. In terms of precise measurements, one of those coronal mass ejections, which the last video showed, a bubble of material going out, is about 1 billion tons. Okay? So there's 1 billion tons going out each time.
A little heavier than the Rhine.
Pardon? Not for its intensity. I can give you sound speeds and pressures. Let's talk more about that after the lecture.
We have time for one more, and then we have to clear the room to make way for the next group.
There's one guy right here.
Okay.
Please.
Do we know why there's an 11-year cycle between the quiet sun and the active sun?
What did he say?
I'm sorry, can you stand up and repeat the question?
Do we know why there's an 11-year period between the active sun and the quiet
Oh.
sun?
Question is, do we understand why there's an 11-year sunspot period between highs and lows of magnetic activity?
Yeah.
I don't, do you?
I don't. I know that it's 11 years plus or minus a year, so you know it's not very accurate. And it's been measured for a very long time, so we know that it's true. From essentially that's a period of the number of sunspots. There's many more sunspots at the maximum and very little sometimes unmeasurable at the minimum, and it is around 11 years for centuries, because you've seen sunspots in aurora and so on. But the answer is tied up somehow with this other person's question who asked about, since there's not monopoles, how is the sun, where do those loops come from? And the answer is that a speculative answer, nobody really knows, but a picture you can paint in your mind's eye is that it takes about 11 years for that magnetism to wind up tight inside the sun. And as it's winding up, the sunspots are moving towards the equator. And when they meet, they annihilate. And they can't do it anymore. So the sun's magnetism has to reform. And it reforms with the opposite polarity. So you start off north-south here, the magnetism gets twisted up inside the sun, and it takes that long, 11 years, to slowly wind up the sun's internal magnetism until it pops, so to speak. So it's a pictorial picture. Yeah.
Sounds pretty good to me. Okay, well, thank you all for coming. Thanks a lot, Ken. You did a great job. We're going to clear out and make way for the next group. If you have more questions, Ken will be available later.
Well, thank you, ladies and gentlemen, and good evening. On behalf of the management of HOLLAND America Line, myself, the officers, staff and crew, I would like to welcome you aboard the MS Rheindamm on our cruise to the Eastern Caribbean. I hope you're all settled by now after the busy day of travelling and packing and getting acquainted with the ship, so all you have to do now is sit back, relax and enjoy yourself. At this time, I would like to take the opportunity to introduce the ship's management and the different department heads. The largest department on board is the hotel department. It is divided into food service, beverage service, administration, housekeeping, medical service and entertainment. And in charge of the hotel department is your hotel manager, Mr. Joost de Raad. Making the ship move from place to place is your chief engineer. He's not only responsible for the pilot power to get us from A to B, but also for a lot of other things that we all tend to take for granted, such as electricity, water supply, ventilation and air conditioning, and not to mention a tremendous amount of maintenance work to keep the Rheindamm in a good operational condition. Your chief engineer is Mr. Hans Deur. The next gentleman is in charge of the navigation on the bridge, where he is assisted by 5 navigators. With the bosun, sailors, the hawsers, the carpenters, he makes sure that the Rheindamm looks good at all times, and don't you think he does a great job? Thank you. A very important aspect of the job is safety on board. That's why we had a boat drill yesterday afternoon, and for this place I would like to thank you for attending the drill. Also, second in command of the vessel is your chief officer, Mr. Werner Timmers. Taking care of all the administration on board is a lady who is always kept very busy in the front office on Promenade Deck, which is our financial nerve center. There is a massive amount of paperwork involved these days to get the ship cleared as soon as possible after entering port. And I'm sure you will be pleased to know that you'll be hearing from her when it comes to settling the bar bills. Your purser is Ms. Erin Ilaya. Well, ladies and gentlemen, if you have any questions or any special requests, please meet our guest relation manager, Ms. Kathleen McGarry. The next gentleman is very important to you, as he's the one most probably responsible for all the extra weight you'll be gaining through the course of this cruise. His job is to see that the ship is sufficiently supplied, but more importantly is that the food is prepared and served to perfection, and that your drinks are served to your satisfaction. Your food and beverage manager is Mr. Bill DeVis. Responsible for the preparation and presentation of about 6,000 meals a day is your executive chef, Mr. David Waters. The next gentleman takes care of your health and your well-being while you're on board. He runs a very modern and well-equipped infirmary on A-Deck Forward, where he's assisted by 3 nurses. And although he's a very capable man, I only hope you get to meet him during the social situation. Your ship's physician is Dr. Robert Foxford. Keeping the Rheindamm absolutely spick and span on the inside is a gentleman responsible for a very large department, taking care of the cabin surface, the cleanliness of the inside of the ship, the laundry, and the tailor shop. And keeping up all the workman's nickname, the spotless fleet, is your chief housekeeper, Mr. Dyatt. Security has become a very important part of travel these days, and the next gentleman sees to it that no undesirables get on board while the ship is in port. He also takes care of the ship discipline and other security aspects of the operation. Your security officer is Mr. Philip Bella. Another lady who runs all kinds of get-together events, which might be over a cup of coffee, a cocktail, or a game of cards. She has a fund of information about the ports we're going to visit, so she knows all the answers to the questions where we go and what we're doing. Your hostess is Miss Yvette Seacrest. Last but not least is a lady who's responsible for all the coordinating that is involved in your daily program. This means the organization of activities to keep you busy during the day and shows to keep you entertained at night. Your cruise director is Miss Susan Wood. You may have noticed that the majority of the crew comes from Indonesia or else the Philippines. Holland Line started an Employee of the Month program a few years ago, and tonight it is my pleasure to introduce the Employee of the Month of January. He's been selected for his integrity, the quality of his work, and his attitude towards those around him. The Employee of the Month of January comes from Indonesia. He works on board of the Rhino as a lifeboat man, in charge of the maintenance of the lifeboats, the sailing equipment, and his name is Mr. Romley. Ladies and gentlemen, here we are on the MS right now sailing in the North Atlantic Ocean. Tomorrow we will spend another relaxing day at sea. The day after tomorrow at approximately 6:30 we'll be at the pilot station of St. Martin and expect to be at anchor at approximately 7:30. In closing, I would just like to say that we hope that every moment of this cruise will be everything you expect from us and even more besides. Well, thank you for attending the champagne party.
幾月幾號啊？2月幾多號啊？
2月26號。
24啊。
美國時間即係
上晝7:50，我哋而家係食緊早餐。今日會喺海上，仲未到達陸地。
從到達
喂，
望出去，你話望出去大海一片茫茫啊！水平線啊，你見到？
經過一片冰山，嚟盛大獻映，好好味啊！
咪將佢攞啲 syrup
都滑㗎啦，
唔使喎，攞落牛油都得嘅喎。
油唔得㗎，唔好味㗎。係啊，落燒至好味。經過一
有隻
片
pancake 咩？
經過一片冰山紀錄，近時經過。
Thank you. We're hoping we had something for everybody. Some of the comments I'm hearing make it sound like everything is for everybody, and that's even better. A couple of quick housekeeping announcements. Many people were frustrated last night looking for the stargazing session. It turns out that what we had planned to do on the aft Lido Terrace became unfeasible because we could either turn out too few lights or too many, and it became unsafe. We have found a really choice spot. It sounds like it's not a good spot, but it really is. It's right out on the bow. The deck, it's on the promenade level, but you can't get there from the promenade level. What you have to do is you have to go to the lower promenade, which is the lifeboat deck, on the starboard side, and everybody knows now that that's not the left. You go all the way forward, and there's a staircase with glass around it. You go up the staircase one level to the promenade deck, and there's a big metal hatch. And it has signage on it that makes you think you should not go through the hatch. But in fact, we're authorized from 9 to 11 p.m. to go through that hatch. You will think you're stepping into a wind tunnel at NASA's Ames Research Center, but you're not. You just have to keep the faith, keep walking out toward the bow. There is a railing there so you won't fall off. And out near the bow, about 6 to 10 feet back, the wind is gone. And it's quiet, and people can talk, and there will be astronomers there to point out the sights of the southern sky. Prediction of the eclipse. Several people have asked, where can I get a copy? The answer is we've made some photocopies, and they're on the, I forget the name of the desk, it's Kathleen's desk, Guest Relations. The Guest Relations desk, which is on this level, promenade, out in the atrium. There are some copies of that. If we run out, just let us know, and we'll make some more. Exclusively to this wonderful event that we're going to see in 2 days, total solar eclipse. Our speaker is Dennis DeChico. He's an associate editor at Sky and Telescope, and someone whom I admire very, very much. When I first came to Sky and Telescope 11 years ago, Dennis was already one of my heroes. He was a legend, having been there at least that long already. He's one of the world's great astroimagers. His photographs have appeared in magazines all over the world, including some real big ones like Time and Newsweek. It's a great pleasure to introduce Dennis DeChico, who will tell us about viewing and photographing and videotaping the solar eclipse.
Speaking of videotaping, I want to get a copy of that introduction for the next time I have to go through a performance review. I don't recall ever hearing any of those before. I have to ask one question. Did you guys get an awful lot of Titanic bad jokes before you left? You know, I got to tell you, no one's been mentioning it on the boat, and I was wondering, maybe I'm alone in this and I won't say anything. But it occurs to me that almost every time we have an eclipse or you want to go someplace, all you have to do is look at an eclipse map, go 5 years in advance from a particular event, and you'll discover that there'll be enormous political upheaval or some other natural disaster that will, you know, render the eclipse a big challenge. I figured, what can go wrong when you're going to be on a cruise ship, right? Little did I expect perhaps one of the biggest movies ever to come out, one of the greatest nautical disasters ever, right as we're leaving to come see this. At any rate, what I'm going to do, as I said yesterday in the introduction, is a little bit of a free-for-all. I have some slides that I'll go through. I say quickly, but I know it'll take about 15, 20 minutes or so. I'll make a few comments about specific things as we're looking at the slides. And then what I'd like to do is open it up to Q&As, because I know people have a lot of questions. As I said yesterday, that even though a lot of us are veterans, you forget the types of questions that come up in people's minds, especially for people who have yet to see a total eclipse. And I just love to have people ask, and as I say, ask. Please don't think that you can ask a question which is too elementary, because I'll guarantee you, if you're brave enough to ask it, there are an awful lot of people out there sitting going, wow, I'm glad somebody did. At any rate, I have seen a lot of eclipses, at least a dozen. I keep saying I'm going to count them. If you see me out on the deck during eclipse day, I have a very large rat-eaten sign that says Stellophane. Stellophane is an amateur astronomy convention that I've been involved with a long time. That sign has been around the world with me numerous times at all the eclipses that I've been to, and I have written down on the back where I've been so I could actually count them up if I wanted to know. But that's what that's all about. I think what I'll do is, as I say, just run a few slides now, sort of as an introduction, and I'll make some comments, and then we'll go to the Q&As. So if we can turn the lights down. My eclipse chasing began in 1970 when some college friends and I decided to do it the hard way, which was to hop in a car in Massachusetts and drive down to North Carolina. I promise you I will not show you every slide I've ever taken at every eclipse expedition I've been to. But at any rate, that was my first total eclipse. It was a very spectacular event, and it was sort of what got me caught up in all of this. I was very fortunate in 1972. That gives you new meaning in the word bad hair day, doesn't it? In 1972, I hooked up with Donald Menzel, who was a former director of Harvard College Observatory, probably one of the leading experts on the sun at the time, and an avid eclipse chaser who had been going to eclipses most of the century. And it turns out I was a part of his group. I was actually a technician. Whoop, I went the wrong way. Let's see. I really went the wrong way. Let's do this again. I was a technician on a large spectrograph that we had set up. And this was a fairly sophisticated piece of equipment. We actually had to build a hut around it that was insulated to sort of keep the temperature constant. And we had gone up to Prince Edward Island in Canada for this eclipse. It was actually a dry run for 1973 when we were going to Africa. Astronomers head out for these things weeks in advance, and it turns out I've discovered why. Because we set up this nice building, it took us days to get everything organized, and then we did a dry run several days before the eclipse, and we discovered right at the time of totality, the sun was hidden right behind this corner of the building from the mirror that reflected it into the spectrograph. I don't have the other picture that shows you we got up there with circular saws and just lopped off the corner of the building, and that was the way we succeeded. But as I say, this was a dry run for 1973, which was a major event. And while I'm not usually traveling light to eclipses, this was a particularly heavy one. We had 3 tons of equipment that we transported over to Africa. And then I got to be a Rommel wannabe, and with a fleet of Land Rovers and Bedford lorries, which were World War II troop transports, we trucked ourselves out into the middle of the Sahara Desert. Well, actually, it was the western edge of the Sahara Desert in Mauritania. Wonderful place. You ever had that desire to just go driving any place in a parking lot? Well, this takes it all the way, I'll tell you. But we set up in some pretty hostile conditions. Now, this was when the wind blew. The wind all blew in one direction constantly. And I said, boy, we kind of blow the sand a little bit around. And I kept saying, wow, we think the desert's going to end up someplace else. And then it turns around about once a month, the wind turns around and with huge ferocity blows it all back in the other direction. So that was quite an event when that happened. Then, in '77, as a different venue, I enjoyed a cruise ship in the Pacific Ocean, part of the Sitmar cruise line. I was on the Fair Sea, and we did our lifeboat drills a little differently then. They just put us all in the lounge, put on the life jacket, and said, you're going to sink or swim if the boat goes down. But I was working at this time with Jay Pasikoff, who was one of Menzel's proteges, and we had a lot of equipment set up on the deck. This was actually the Los Alamos crew, and they had a beautiful gyro-stabilized piece of equipment that would compensate for the ship's motion. And to tell you the types of things that can go wrong and the stuff you should plan for, here again, we had been on this ship for days and had all this equipment set up. We were on the forward deck that was blocked off from all the other people. And there was bulkhead doors similar to the ones that people went through last night to get out on that forward bow to observe. And the Los Alamos people were pulling their electricity off of a light fixture by one of the doors. They had unscrewed the bulb and they had a big cable that went in and all the power came out. Well, it turns out, unbeknownst to us, the cruise ship had decided to put the people that were in great fear of their lives during the partial phases into a lounge behind that bulkhead. And they said, what we will do is during totality, we will tell you when it's safe, open the door, and you can come out. And this is the honest to God truth. As totality struck, they swung open the bulkhead door, hit the power cord, and yanked it out. And Los Alamos went through the whole thing with no electricity. The whole experiment went down. It was not a lot of fun at the time, but it shows you the type of stuff that can go wrong. You plan for these things in advance, and it can happen. Anybody here planning to try to use electricity during the time of the eclipse? That's good. Because I always tell people, bring your own batteries. Don't rely on other power. And that is the last way that I've seen an eclipse. In 1979, some friends and I got together, and in a bit of extravagance, we rented a small jet. And we took off from Sacramento, California, and flew up over the Idaho-Montana border. And to show you, again, the types of things you don't necessarily anticipate, here was inside the aircraft. What we had done is we had taken off the inner window. There's a double window. There's the window which is part of the hull of the aircraft, and then there's an whoa, I went too far. There's a little inner window here, and what we had taken is on the side of the plane that we were going to observe the eclipse from, we had pulled the windows out, and it looks kind of ratty there. You can see the insulation. Over here, you can see the window is left in place. Well, what happened is when we got up airborne, the temperature outside drops to 50 to 60 below zero. That window gets cold, and it started frosting up. Now, I got to tell you, this is not the best way to view an eclipse. And at the point when you've got 25 minutes to go before you're going to interact with the moon shadow and see totality, you get a little bit worried. But leave it to engineers to come up with a solution. A little bit of paper and something that every eclipse goer needs to have a lot of, tape. We connected a little bit of a heat duct here, and we went from the heat vents on the top of the airplane that were up to full blast. And I got to tell you, the pilot and the co-pilot were turning into cooked eggs in the front. They had a lot of heat. Anyhow, we managed to blow a little bit of air on the window and clear off a small spot like that. So, I got to tell you, the view wasn't quite as expansive as we originally thought, but we did get a good view of totality. And I'll tell you, there's one thing, at 31,000 feet, something that you will not get an easy chance to experience at lower levels, is the shadow of the moon racing across the ground to come intersect you. That, to me, overwhelmed the eclipse itself. It was amazing to just see the shadow sweeping along the ground. So that was one of the advantages of airborne. All right, now, a little bit about what we're going to see. You all know we're going to start out looking at the sun, and then we're going to see a couple of little bites be taken out of it, and then we're going to have an hour and a half, as Rick said, of partial phases. Now, I got to tell you, I didn't want to contradict Rick yesterday, but he said that partial eclipses are dramatic and exciting things. Well, they may be on planet Feinberg, but I'll tell you, for my money, partial phases don't do much for me. They're about as exciting as getting a kiss from your sister, I think. But it ain't, and I don't have a sister, mind you. But the truth of the matter is, they will give you time to get ready, and also time to have everything go wrong that you're thinking about going wrong. The one thing I want to warn you about if you're doing photography of partial phases is keep an eye on your exposure counter. Do not get caught, and it sounds like a joke, but it's true. Do not get caught on exposure number 34 of a 36 exposure roll at the end of partial phases, just as totality. The guy laughing in the audience, he goes, "I did that last time." Now, listen, I grew up in New England, very, very conservative Yankees. My mother didn't save bits of string and pieces of tinfoil, but she probably thought it was a good idea. And I'll tell you, I look at an exposure counter, and it hurts to rewind the film when you're on exposure number 30. Do it. You know, if you want to make the eclipse a Kodak moment, do it with a fresh roll of film. So please, if you do partial phases, do keep your eye on that exposure counter. At any rate, you'll have that hour and a half to watch the sun go away. And then at the very end, this is where it starts to get very exciting. Oh, wait a minute. Oh, it surprised me. One of the things I wanted to ask or mention was I had people ask questions yesterday. It had to do with, can I use my exposure meter for the eclipse? And the answer is, for the most part, no. And here's a good example why. This is just a look into a camera viewfinder, and you're seeing a partial eclipse there. But if you notice, the entire frame of the camera is, for the most part, black. And depending on the light metering system of your camera, if it tries to measure that, it's saying, well, there's no light here. It's going to go crank the exposure up to the longest exposure that the camera can do, which will probably blow out the eclipse itself. It'll overexpose it, particularly in the partial phases. So your light meter isn't really a handy thing to use for partial phases. There are people that have spot meters in their cameras, sophisticated ones where they can go around and meter a particular point. I think anyone that has a camera like that, you're probably sophisticated enough to know the answer. I don't have to go further. If you do have that and you want to talk about it afterwards, I invite you to come up. We'll do a one-on-one and we can discuss different ways that that might be used to your advantage. This is a picture of an eclipse that took place in 1984. It was an annular event in the sense that the moon did not completely cover the sun, but they were almost the same match. And I tossed this in because it sort of shows a lot of eclipse phenomena here at one point. What's going on? This was a special telescope camera system that I had built. Right down the middle of the frame, right here, this side of the frame has an ND4 neutral density filter. This is one of these filters which is suitable for blocking out the sun and taking partial phase exposures. You are seeing the limb of the whole bright sun right here, and it's being filtered so the exposure is cut way down low. On the other side, this is open sky. There's nothing blocking the view here. This was a 4-inch f/15 refractor, and it was Kodachrome 64 film, and this happened to be 125th of exposure, for those of you just dying to know. But what's going on here? This little bead of light is one little tiny speck of unfiltered sunlight. In other words, all the sun that you're seeing over here, these little beads of light, this one happens to be unfiltered because it was on the right of that filter. You can also see the chromosphere here. This is the very lowest part of the sun's atmosphere. It has that pink color. There was a very spectacular prominence that stuck up on the side. It was very, we didn't know that this was going to be there. It was like frosting on the cake. We were hoping we might see a little bit of the corona, which we actually did. I mean, this was kind of a wild thought because it was not a total eclipse. But it turned out to be a very spectacular picture. I put it in there simply because I say it shows the phenomena of a filtered sun, an unfiltered lower chromosphere, and also inner corona shot done with just an open lens. As I say, this is about enough f/15 on Kodachrome 64, and one of those bright beads. I have another shot here that just shows a fraction of a second later. You can see that there's more beads exposed. The moon was moving to the left in this picture, and what happened is midway through the eclipse, I had the filter flip over and reverse this section, but I don't have a lot of shots from this sequence. This is a shot of the central part of that eclipse through an identical telescope. There were twins side by side. This one had a filter over the lens of the telescope, covered the objective. And have you all heard the term Bailey's beads? People talk to you about what you're going to see. You're going to get up towards totality, and people are going to yell out Bailey's beads and diamond ring. You're going to hear all these things. What the heck are Bailey's beads? What they are is the limb of the moon has all hills and valleys, little mountains. And those mountains will break up the last little bit of sunlight that you can see, and this will just show you just how hilly the moon is. Because look, he kind of miscalculated where he was, and he wasn't really into the path of totality. He was right along the edge, so he got to see a real spectacular display of these beads. In 1991, we were in Mexico, and as a matter of fact, there were my twin telescopes reincarnated a little bit differently. Everything was covered with this luminized mylar simply because it was so hot down there. We were in the absolute noonday sun with the sun overhead. But I had one telescope set up to take sort of the large coronal pictures. The other telescope set up with a lot of magnification, and here's a view of it here. This is actually a 3-meter focal length, about 3,000 millimeter focal length. It was that 4-inch objective with a 2x teleconverter put in it. You can only see part of the moon here. This is entirely unfiltered. Again, an exposure of about 125th of a second. And this was a very spectacular prominence on the limb of the sun. We're hopeful, because that sunspot group is going to be on the limb of the sun for totality for us, that we might see some features like this. So if there are those of you working at very long focal lengths, And because of the ship's motion, you're thinking of taking very short exposures, you could get some very good pictures like this. And in fact, long ago when I was thinking about what I might do on the ship if I really wanted to do some heavyweight photography, I was thinking I might try this type of event. It turns out I've changed my thinking, but I'm just saying this could be done. Now, just to show you how quickly things can change, there's two more pictures here that drop in. These were taken, I think, about 1 second apart with a motor drive camera. And you can see that bead of light. Well, I like that, flipped in and upside down. That little bead of light now is shrunk down, and then a second later, almost gone. So things happen very, very quickly toward the end, just as we get into totality. And likewise when we come out from totality. This is a shot of that eclipse. Now, while I can take credit for 4/5 of the photography used in this picture, I actually would rather step back and say that the reason you're seeing such a spectacular image is because of a computer programmer named Steve Albers. It turns out, I bumped into him at the airport.
聽日唔中意入巴士喎，竟然去買嘅。叫人哋起身咧。落去啦。
我睇住佢唔使個幕喺度睇啊！
有得去啦，係啦，你坐嗰個啦，媽咪啲歌咁長得啊！
我話點解喺度？
係啦，打住。
Excuse me, can you sit closer together, please?
我哋而家去邊個島啊？呢個叫聖馬田嘅島，我哋離開呢個我哋自己隻船啊。今日係2月25號啊！整啲浪上嚟先。哇！你睇我哋嘅船幾宏偉，係咪啊？我哋船好宏偉。好啦，而家我哋嚟到柏碼頭上岸喎。
Are you serious? It's an old red
大咦？喂，好多日本車喎。
梗係拖啦，日本仔唔識做生意
Yeah, they were doing a lot of hard to
但係細佬望出嚟幾大人做衛星碟，啊幾靚喎，有個湖喎。
我咧，我睇下。
話呢啲看到。哇！幾多鋪頭，簡單嘅，2層一間。呢度應該係荷屬嘅，呢度應該荷蘭呢邊管治嘅。
哦，係啊，佢嗰度寫住有間銀行都係呢嘅名。
The Dutch side 應該，另外一邊係 French side 應該。哇！幾靚喎！呢度人重車揞得幾個人？喂，架車係咪揞得好舒服啊？係咯。佢雖然啲嘢好似好舊，但係好乾淨。係咪？係嘛？
冇乜車啊，可能。
係咯，好乾淨。哇！好嗰啲美國色彩仲多過荷蘭嗰啲，係。
呢度荷屬不法屬啊，而家冇。
呢邊荷屬。
我講話講，但係實佢跟美國好多嘢。
係咯。靚唔靚啊？
好。
係啊，對出去就係嗰個大西洋。哇！你睇下幾靚，有個船房啊！
look down there.
你都睇唔睇到啊
？Try and get it out.
And then, ladies and gentlemen, last but not least, we have Jolly B upstairs, and he has his 151 rum punch, fruit punch and soft drinks, of course complimentary of the boat. He also has beers for $1. He has Carib beer, big beer of the Caribbean, and he has Miller Lite for only $1. And every time you hear him ring that nasty bell, ladies and gentlemen, that means somebody gave him a trip, and it's thank you very much. Alright then, ladies and gentlemen, please, I can see some people smiling here so far. Ladies and gentlemen, as far as the weather is concerned, it's a beautiful day. Yes, don't worry about that. Ladies and gentlemen, as far as the weather is concerned, it's a nice, beautiful day. And unfortunately, about the delay, so is the bear.
La cerveza Carib, que es la cerveza de la isla. Y bueno, que pasen un buen tiempo y les voy a contar más de la isla en un momento.
而家過咗呢個島咧，頭先開船嗰邊就係 Dutch side， 而家過嚟呢邊咧就係 French side 啦，即係法國管治嘅。Side belongs to who?
So there they were, ladies and gentlemen, standing back to back. The Dutchman with a bottle of gin and the Frenchman with a bottle of wine, and off they went. But for some unknown reason, nobody knows why or how it happened. Whether the Dutchman had too much gin and fell asleep, or whether the Frenchman walked a little faster when he had the wine. But how it turned out was that the Dutch side, the French side is a little bigger than the Dutch side. And ladies and gentlemen, that is the legend of 1648. And that monument that we saw at the Afghan border was erected in remembrance of the legend of 1648 to 1948. Alright, ladies and gentlemen, we're on the French side now.
Francés en el 1648 para compartir dos soldados, uno que se fue a la izquierda, uno a la derecha, con la idea de compartir, hacer la frontera y de compartir esa isla. Y han hecho así, pero lo que pasa es que el francés caminó muy bien, solo tomaba un poco de vino, entonces tenía una buena marcha, pero el holandés se paró de vez en cuando, se tomó un vino holandés y salió con las mujeres, entonces claro, hice menos de kilómetros y para eso que la parte francesa es más grande que la parte holandesa. Y esa coexistencia de todos modos, esa coexistencia
因為佢真係起磚屋㗎，媽咪嗱，河邊起緊嗰間白嘅間。喺啲山上面影啲相啊！ 媽咪向我頭出去。咁樣影佢都得啊！係啊。就係法屬上邊山頂嘅堡壘，以前就有炮台喺度啊！以前我打仗咧就將個島分咗法國屬地、荷蘭屬地噶嘛。
啲人霸咗之後，咁咪點啊？你隨時可以行過嚟話係你喎，我話係有起個堡壘喺度。
媽咪行呢邊咧。 唔好捐入去啲後街啦，沿住個河邊行啦。 呢度就係 friend side 嘅 Marga， 只係仲有就可以見得到咧，即係出現喺畫面嘅太陽咧。
媽咪應該去唔去個慶祝會啊？
咁我用咗係3個系統去做呢個攝影嘅。咁第一個咧就係，喂你唔有就係呢個錄影。咁錄影咧照係用翻錦龍嘅1/1呢個機身。咁加一個
紫外線有冇搞錯你？
可以調校成嘅增距鏡。咁再有一個咧由呢個 VL mount 住呢個 US Mark 嘅 adapter。咁另外一支咧就係70-300毫米嘅 zoom lens。咁呢個 zoom lens 係錦龍唯一係有呢一個係 image stabilizer， 因為咧就恐怕喺攝影嗰陣時咧就係會受到震盪嗰陣時咧增加個影像嗰個穩定性。咁前邊再加塊咧就係刀身屋嘅 filter， 咁上邊咧就係有一個 Nikon 用嘅一個 filter holder。咁準備喺部 photography 嗰陣時咧就要離開呢個 solar filter 呢個太陽嘅 photography。咁呢個今次攝影咧全部都係用自動嘅 exposure。咁嗰個對焦咧就係手電對焦就唔係自動對焦，因為電動對焦有個可能咧就係話當有雲食嗰陣時，太暗咧嗰個對焦系統係揾唔翻嗰個影像。咁呢個咧就係呢個像錄影。咁然後喺呢個靜態攝影方面咧，就係用呢個錦龍嘅400F 2.8相機鏡頭，加一個2成增距鏡。咁用嘅機身咧就係 US1N。咁合成焦距咧就應該係800毫米 F5.6。咁今次用嘅菲林咧就係 ASA 25嘅。咁我用低速菲林就係希望咧嗰個 image 出嚟嘅效果比較好嘅。咁其次個相機咧就有一個 data back， 咁係做咗一個 interval timer。咁呢個時間編排咧就係每5秒鐘係影一張。咁希望咧就係話喺3分鐘之內咧就將整個嘅攝過程，即係可能嗰個時間咧就係可以影咗落嚟。咁另外一個系統咧，靜態攝影系統就係用咗 F1。
喂，星仔，嗌你啊！喂，晴晴，Uncle 嗌你 hello 個。你好。你好。
好。咁機身方面咧就係用 Hello。How are you？ 咁亦都係 program 咗佢就係自動攝影。
星仔，你識唔識用爸爸個鏡啊？
都係影一張。
我冇識用爸爸個鏡。
希望喺兩個靜態攝影嗰個
佢就咁樣咯。啊，等陣，你有冇咁錄影啊？
有嘅應該，佢跳緊啲舞啊！你
啊？唔係呢個啊？
嚇唔係呢個咩？係跳緊啊嘛！
喺中間跳嘅，呢度寫住錄影啊！
係啊係啊係啊！
跟一個 USRT 用 ASA 準備咧就係影呢個 background 喺度。我有一個係
喂，你咪清晒我嘢出嚟喎
！MV1 咁亦都係準備係喺呢個 photography 咯，影呢個 background 嘅。咁呢兩部機咧就唔係安喺呢個腳架上邊，前述嗰3部機咧就係安咗喺一個 ISO 嘅 G138嘅液態嘅呢個 video mount 嘅。咁因為咧3支鏡個系統嘅重量咧亦都相當重，加埋有成40磅。咁為咗方便去追蹤而唔用呢個望遠鏡嘅 Equatorial Mark 咧，咁 Fluid Head 方面咧係應該係比較係叫做係適合去追蹤用嘅。
爹哋得未啊？爹哋。等陣。睇到？
陣間會睇到㗎。
嗰度有粒星啊！嗰啲係咪
度？邊度？邊度啊仔？
嗰粒咧好細咧。
啊，係咪嗰粒啊？睇唔到媽咪。
係啊，好似一個圓筆轉出咁啊。
喺邊度喂？熄咗佢。仲未揾？好黑啊！好黑，好黑。你唔好影個太陽喎，唔可以影個太陽喎。
啊，咁難影嘅？
唔可以影個太陽喎。
係啊，冇影。
好凍啊！好似日落西山咁。
媽咪準備影啦。
可能中暑。
I'm feeling a cool breeze on the starboard side of the ship. Temperature is definitely going down.
你影住爹哋啊！
The moon covers it.
哇！天啊，影個太陽啊！
Bring it back, bring it back.
Yeah！
All right, the stars are all there.
影唔到啊！
哇，媽咪，我影到啊！
Wow, prominence. So that is awesome.
睇先。喂，快啲，快啲！
哇，我影到啊！
影住。
影唔到 Mercury 啊！
你影遠啲。放遠啲啊！影到係嘛？你放遠啲嘛嗱，兩粒星啊！仲有粒喺下邊 ，Venus， 睇到？睇唔到？好，縮埋少少。
見到方面嚟嘅都有。
唔得太細啦，放，啱啱近啲。
哦，咁樣。
哇，好靚啊！爹哋呢部機
影唔到啊！你有冇撳咗個掣啊？
冇啊！
着佢啊！
哇，好靚啊！
望上去，見到一條絲個頂嗰度咧有啲紅色㗎。
Sorry, in my excitement, I forgot to yell, take off your filters. If anyone
Take everything 啊！好多啦，
哇，好靚啊！爹哋撳唔到啊！你部機。
點解啊？
唔知啊！你死我啦！
我哋而家喺邊度啊，媽咪？嚇？喂，星。而家準備去做咩啊？
而家坐船去坐潛艇，落水底睇珊瑚魚。
睇珊瑚啦，呢度就係巴巴多斯個海岸。哇，有個好靚嘅沙灘。
靚個沙灘幾長。
Yeah。
哇！你又影啊？你睇嗰啲咁行出啦，我哋盡量買呢個先。
Get on board this. So. Yeah, get down the slope, turn around， 轉轉面先落得㗎。
俾媽咪行先。
係啦。
媽咪可以睇到你。
轉轉面自己扶住落，係啦。
咁行先啊仔，慢慢。OK，得唔得？有好似媽咪咁，係啦。OK。
呢個我睇到。Pieces of all the seats， 要全部佔有晒啊！啲座位唔好剩翻啲。
係啊，你想睇你咪望出嗰度睇啊。
準備開船未啊？而家4尺深啊，前邊嗰度有個 digital show 咧，幾多尺啊？嗱，3尺、4尺 ，FT 就 feet。
Our tour, what I'll let you do is listen to the communication between the surface officer and the pilot as we're descending. Come here, 1-5, then get in front of it.
你落課咧，一俾我條喊喺澳洲嗰次。
Make a straight correction to head and come in north and come here, 1-5.
我一次抱住你帶你落去喺個潛艇嗰度。
Arizona, suitable to go.
Okay, we're completely submerged at this point. Is this everyone's first time on a submarine?
Yeah.
Is this everyone's first time on a submarine? Yeah? Mine too.
150尺。
Those of you on the right side of the submarine or starboard side, if you look out, you may be able to see a stingray on the sand. If you see it, it should be up front. If you see it, please try to show the person next to you.
你睇下見唔見先 ？Stingray。
焗咗喺度嗰河啊？唔係啊。
No。
唔係啊，冇啊，個喺啲沙嗰度個 stingray。
Did anyone? The bar jack speeds on some of the leftovers from what the stingray is eating, and he's allergic to it, so it changes his color. The barjack is normally a silver fish with a dark line running down the back of its body, and it changes him all black, gives him a dark color, because he eats the shellfish that the stingrays feed on, and his body has an allergic reaction to it. Now you'll find fish at this depth like the stingray, the flying gurnards, the flunders, snake eels, urchin. Most of the ships would sink at anchor. Now it is a very good idea to sink ships, cars, buses, concrete slabs, tires, if properly managed. In reef, as you will destroy coral growth, you want to have an area preferably near to an already existing reef, so that the fish from that reef will frequent the wreck. You also want to make the vessel environmentally friendly by removing anything that will be toxic to the marine environment. You take any chemicals that would have been on the vessel off, you remove the oil from the engine, you take the grease off, you remove the paint.
車胎都有，哎呀，唔污糟嘅。
You will notice that some of the hatches are open and some of them are closed. The diver within the wreck. Now the large disc-shaped fish that but you know that saying, the one that goes until death do us part? The angelfish seems to take that one very, very seriously. Now if one of those fish in that pier were to become caught or one dies, the remaining angelfish in the pier remain. Now in other words, the remaining angelfish commits what the guys usually call down here suicide. Yes, didn't hear that saying that goes, there are lots more fish in the sea, right? Now we're just making our way to the top of the reef. Our maximum depth there before was 133 feet.
Gonna come to the top of the reef. The very top of the reef. It's like a plateau. It's flat on the top, slopes off on the sides.
哇！有條大嘅梳子魚。
The reef that we're going to be diving on today is called the Freshwater Bay Reef. Freshwater Bay. It has been aptly named because of the many springs that flow into it from our island. If you were to just imagine that the submarine was a time capsule and we were going back into time, this reef is what our island would have looked like many thousands of years ago. Our island was once a coral reef. It was pushed to the surface due to the movement of the Earth's crust, unlike our neighboring Caribbean islands, which tend to be more volcanic in nature.
哦，啲 coral 都幾靚。Beautiful coral.
I think the yellow is all partial.
有一個細心啲可能有。
係啊。
佢細心啲都可能有㗎。可能會細心啲都有。啲字形啊。
有冇啲 L 啊？係啦係啦。
I'll just give you a few facts about the reef. Basically everything you can see from here in the submarine can be classified as an animal. There are plants on the reef, but you have to get really close to see those plants and distinguish them. They're in the form of algae and plankton. The most obvious animals are the fish, the not so obvious are the coral and the sponges.
Angel.
As I said before, all of the light that we're using here is natural. It is sunlight. We don't have any artificial lights on the reef. There are no external lights on the submarine. However, just bear in mind all of the colors that you're seeing of the fish and of the coral may not be the actual true color at all.
哇，幾大咧！好多好多喂！哇！呢啲都
Most, if not all of the fish that we'll see today will be the smaller type fish. They're commonly called day fish or reef fish. They're diurnal, they're herbivores, they eat mainly algae, and they feed on some of the plankton that floats in the water. These fish have pretty much adapted themselves to this reef in that they have short bodies. Their sides are what we call laterally compressed, they're flat. They basically have a disc shape and small tails. It makes these reef fish very agile. It allows them to get quick bursts of speed and make lots of swift and sharp turns so that they'll be able to duck into the reef easily. So many of these fish that you'll see will hardly ever venture out into open water. They will stick close to the reef. As this reef not only provides food for these fish, it provides protection. The many cracks and crevices of the reef provides a home for these fish and protection. At night, many of these fish will go into the reef, go to sleep. You'll find the carnivores will tend to come onto the reef. mainly during the night, feed on the smaller fish. You'll find that the carnivores are longer, their bodies are more rounded and heavily muscled, they have larger tails. It gives them an increase in speed. It enables them to attack the reef fish at very high speeds. However, with the advantage of having a longer body and an increase in speed comes the disadvantage of having to make lots of wide turns if they miss their prey the first time.
係有啲蛙術上黑色嗰條啊。喂，有一條長嗰啲啊，喺嗰啲珊瑚裏邊一塊葉咁樣打洞企喺度。
你那边穿的有一种。
向住太陽嘛，facing the sun 咪清楚。哇！呢度有好多，梗係放啲嘢出嚟食啊！哇！啲魚仔啊！
Now the smaller brown fish that you're seeing here, these and the neon blue ones, they're about the same basic shape and size. Those are the blue and the brown chromite. The chubby blue ones that swim with their side fins, those are the Creole wrasse. There are some slender blue ones, about 4 inches in length. Those are the silver sides. Silver sides. Sticking close to the reef, you'll see a small black fish that has a white tail just hovering above the reef. It's called a bicolored damsel. If you watch the bicolored damsel carefully, you will see that it hardly ever moves more than a foot away from its original position. Now the bicolored damsels are considered the farmers of the reef. They'll cultivate a patch of algae and they'll then guard that algae patch with their lives. If another fish tries to swim across that algae patch or tries to take a bite out of that algae patch, the bicolored damsel will become very aggressive and it will fight that fish away. It sometimes fights fish away which are 10 to 15 times its size. And it's been even known to tackle scuba divers as well. If you try to touch this algae patch, it'll nip at your fingers. It does, however, have one flaw. As it's chasing you away from its algae patch, it becomes lost, as it has a very poor sense of navigation. It then has to start the process of making a new algae patch all over again. You may also notice some tiny yellow fish on the reef.
Oh, look at that. Oh.
If the pilot can successfully do that, the maneuver will be known as subdivision. So these are some of the predators that we have on the reef. They're called horse-eyed jacks. They're known locally as cavalli. There are some of the tick on another one. We have those jacks once more. There's some on the starboard side and some coming up on port. Anthony's really doing a good job today. You may have noticed a line running down the side of their bodies. It's called a horizontal line. That's how those fish communicate by vibration. They can send a signal from one end of the school to the next in maybe 100th of a second. That's how fish can swim in such large numbers. Good conditions to grow. But the only thing that grow well at this step, you'll notice some long wire-like structures that spiral at the smaller vessel that respawns on the starboard side. The larger vessel, the ocean crest, will be
啊，搖到暈我火呢哋嗰啲。呢個上面嗰個人搖到，跟住喺坐喺船嗰個人搖到，伸咗個人出去搖到。
There's the saw. Oh, 我哋翻去係啊。前來啦。私踢。快啲！係啊，第二隻車翻嚟買。
船咧，上面係船，下面係潛水艇，應該係啦。
係喎，可能係喎。
唔係啊，就唔係咯。
係啊。
最影響後生
就咁。
啊？咩啊？唔得啦，冇電啊！
幾啊？12喎。
快啲啊，仲玩？呢個易啦，你好易啫。呢個自己去測。
呢度就係我哋嗰個船嘅睡房啦。
咦？7+7歲啊
？7+24。7+2就係10歲啦。
做啦，自己測咗數。
呢個就係船艙裏邊望出嗰個碼頭。呢個碼頭咧就喺巴巴多斯嘅。
將自己當係7，定將自己當係9啊？
我哋嘅船就泊咗喺呢一度。
9+1係幾多
？17。
你話幫佢9+1幾多先
？9+1等於10咯。
係啦。
早咧就嚟到呢個海港叫咩 ？Port Free， 即係瓜德那嗰個海港喎。而家咧今日咧係2月28號，我哋一早嚟到呢個海港，咁啊隻船咧準備泊埋碼頭。咁呢個咧就係碼頭。前邊可以見到嘅城市，呢個叫瓜德那，瓜德陸啊，
瓜德羅。
係啊，瓜德那城市。係啊。
喂，唔使起橋喎，喺嗰度兜過去。而家咪打橫
係咯，佢唔夠俾佢擠埋去嘅，而家實撞咗落去個船頭嗰度啫。係咯，趌到出嚟嘅個船頭。喂，好啦，揸船嗰個睇清楚啊！砰一聲就係咁先，我哋喺度有排住啊！而家係死蝦佬添喎！拋行李上船咧，而家睇到嗰啲本地嗰啲，哇！如果跌咗嚿落海咁啊，幾慘啊！唉，因為第一次見喎，咁樣上課。係咯，一件一件，好似打籃球射籃咁啊！係啊，咁啊掉過去，船嗰個接得到喎。
消費力強啲嘛。
呢度就係市中心，我哋準備坐呢啲車出去參觀日覽。
再嚟低個袋。
唉，真係高興到嚇！高興到真係抵，真係。
Bonjour à tous, le petit train vous souhaite la bienvenue dans notre île et vous remercie de l'avoir choisi pour visiter la très belle ville de Pointe-à-Pitre. Je me présente, je m'appelle Fabienne et notre chauffeur c'est René. J'aurai le plaisir de vous guider à travers la ville de Pointe-à-Pitre et de vous faire découvrir les plus belles places. Good morning, it is a real pleasure that we welcome you in our wonderful island. We thank you for choosing the little train to visit the city. Let me introduce me, I'm Fabienne and our driver, it's René. We are going to discover the main feature of Pointe-à-Pitre and the main places of interest. Puis Achille René Boisneuf, qui doit son nom à un Guadeloupéen, qui fut le maire de Pointe-à-Pitre de 1918 à 1926. Here we are now in Achille René Boisneuf Street. Achille René Boisneuf was the mayor of Pointe-à-Pitre from 1918 to 1926.
係啊，哎呀，嗰啲教人畫畫定織衫。
Sur votre droite, admirez le musée Saint-Jean-Pierre. La construction de ce musée représente un des rares exemples de l'architecture coloniale, example of the colonial architectural around the end of the 19th century. Mort en 1975.
market 市場市集啊！貓激角咧，我好中意。個媽咪啊，媽咪好正啊！
而家行翻嚟夠時間咩？
唔記得邊條街啊？
Nous sommes ici à la rue Nauzière. Nauzière était un gouverneur guadeloupéen de 1772 à 1776. We are here in Nauzière Street.
係咪好得意啊？呢啲屋，大佬係咪啊？兩層喎，法國屋。你睇下串啲唔係英文嚟喎，係法。
佢依家俾可能喺度睇佢玩啊，睇下冇埋鬼都。有啲鋪頭實地翻買嘢鬼靚，好靚啊！呢
我啲警察啊，幾有型啲法官，喺呢邊有上景啲。
香港嗰啲仲有影，都好大
呢個
隻狗同你哈佬啊！你唔用哈佬嘅？
啲細路仔啊！
頭先個小朋友同你揮手。
哇！保持有啲咁闊嘅呢啲車仔。雷諾、寶馬。
BMW 都係啊，佢哋發癲嘅。
夠晒情調。
咁鬼熱嘅地方，你調把條線嘅
係啊，佢涼嘅喺陰仙嗱，而家呢度邊度熱嘅啫，係嘛？係咪？
正式冇屋啊！呢間。
It is an administrative area. On your right, the post office.
嗰個啊，係咪啊？
係啊。
嗰邊我喺度嗰度沿住行咧，都見到成3架的啊，3個 Benz 啊。
佢連的士都係 Benz 咁，你話佢勁唔勁？
係咯，2架真 Benz， 2架私家車，1架的士。
係咪好靚啊？呢個地方？
唔係啊，佢用 Dragon 嚟整㗎，嗰啲 taxi。
哇！呢啲幾古老嗰啲建築物。
諗下啲鬼死唔知做。
係咯。
Sur votre bord gauche, le centre culturel Reminiscenza vous obtient de nombreuses expositions. On your left, it is Reminiscenza Cultural Center, where a lot of exhibitions take place.
冷咩？聽過冇事點會冷嘅啫？個口涼。咁係咪？
係啊，香港啲太陽曬嗰度
好熱啊！
係啊，你又唔幫我查定先嘅，頭先都話嘅。你而家幫我查啲落去，坐喺度。要查啦。係啊，坐埋啲啊。係啊。哇！啲靚車。 啲花，我未睇啲花幾靚。
哇！呢係熱帶花嚟㗎。得唔得啊？Aplauso！ 係啊，嗰隻籠裏邊嗰隻雞啊，唔係我哋話嗰啲珍珠雞啊。我哋香港人都有人食嗰隻珍珠雞。
Les privilèges de mettre sur les magnifiques bouquets de fleurs ainsi que la viande. We are now at the market of Madame Rio. You can find here fruits, vegetables, flowers, and so on.
哇！整餅乾啊！哇！啲 banana 哇，啲大叔，車過嚟，車過嚟。
你香港人嘅有車街都好巴閉啊，周街都係。
去到揾到先啦，單車。佢耳眼嘛。哦，呢啲咁都爭平死喎，呢啲。
哇！爭平死啊！住呢啲樓嘅知唔知啊？
住買啲平啲啊嘛，平啲啊嘛。
佢可能唔係幾有稅嘅。
買一架車咁，我有口水可能冇嘅，嗰啲免稅購嚟啊嘛，啊，可能冇有口稅，係價嘛。
Sur votre droite, le cimetière de Pointe-à-Pitre. On your right, the cemetery.
我有騎樓嘛，政府樓都叫嘅講笑。我哋揾啲細嘅冇騎樓，哦，兜個圈啊，呢啲即係望到嗰個貨櫃碼頭。
搶嘅。
哇！哥斯拉乜都出齊畫多。
車行啊，保橋啊。電視塔香港過啦，哇！保橋啊，Total 啊 ，Total 係法國最大嘅電油公司啊，POT 係啊，我哋嗰陣時去海南島咪見過佢哋嗰啲人咧，即係佢開採啲南海油田，即係等於美國 ASO 啊，荷蘭嘅 Shell。
唔係喎，呢啲係咩網花嘅咯喎，有一個
Par Christophe Colomb lors de son débarquement sur Maria Capitaine le 4 novembre 1493. The name Guadeloupe was given to the island by Christopher Columbus when he landed at St. Marie-Capesterre on the 4th of November 1493. The island had no name for its Spanish conquerors. Unlike its native population, the Carib Indians, who call it Cahuquera, which means island of beautiful waters. But Guadeloupe is often called the Emerald Island. It is also known as a butterfly, since the island looks like a butterfly with its wings spread. Guadeloupe is divided into two islands by a small arm of sea called the Salty River, the chalky region of Nanterre and the volcanic region of Basse-Terre.
都係熱帶，仲熱帶多啲喎，睇下，好多嗰啲椰樹咯。但係佢個形式咧就唔同新加坡、馬來西亞係嘛？佢有佢嗰個 style 係嘛？係嘛？
On your right, a little fishing boat.
哇，幾靚個字！
Je vais un coup d'œil sur votre droite, vous pouvez apercevoir le Charrier, qui est la zone industrielle de la Guadeloupe. Cette zone a été conçue afin de permettre des échanges entre l'Europe, les États-Unis et les îles de la Caraïbe. Il faut savoir que le projet is the heart of the economy in Guadeloupe. This area was built in order to allow trade between Europe, the United States and the Caribbean islands.
高級嗰啲可能一般嘅，一般中等。應該有啲喺沙上，有啲高級咧沉船啦。唔係沉船，爛船。
Sur votre droite, le marché des maraîchers de Bergeville. Il faut savoir que l'agriculture est l'une des principales activités de l'île grâce à la production de la banane et de la canne à sucre.
Open market 啊呢度呢啲，哇市場哇大把瓜賣，哇好正。
Thanks to the production of banana.
係啊好多。
On your right, a little market where women from Haiti sell clothes not to be found but transparent.
佢哋兩個又唔嚟嘅嗬。哇！佢哋兩個係咯係咯，如果唔係好似我哋咁樣坐兜外邊。係啊，睇到啦。哇！啲巴士啊，零次巴士啊，零次巴士啊。哇！犀利。又喺度唱啲人。 啊知啊，睇到啦，睇到啦，好煩。
咁多架的士嘅，咁多架的士。
Actif de Pointe-à-Pitre. Sur votre gauche, la poste, et juste après la poste, la maison. Route and vers de Pointe-à-Pitre. Here we are again, the boulevard Anne. On your left, the post office, and just further down, the municipal building. Mr. Henri Bangou has been the mayor of Pointe-à-Pitre since 1965.
1955年到而家去西邊，頭先去東邊。
La rue de Dia que nous présentons maintenant doit son nom à un écrivain né à Pointe-à-Pitre en 1789, instituant une école ouverte aux études de noir et blanc. Cette rue, ainsi que les ouvriers qui la couvrent, est bordée de très belles maisons de bois de style colonial. Now we are getting on to Bavian Street. This street has taken its name from a writer born in Pointe-à-Pitre in 1789. This street, as well as all other crossing ones, is planted with wooden houses of colonial style, a mixture of English, Spanish, and French architecture.
幾靚啲花媽咪，幾靚。
改個妝啊嘛，講下咩？
講起進小路。
L'île en 1794. On your left, the Victory Square, which is the main square in the city. The Victory Square was so called after the victory of Hugues against the English people who occupied the island in 1794.
點解行翻呢度？喂喂，呢隻食嗰啲餅啊 ，French 香港咁樣嘅，冚唪唥都食㗎。呢個得住荷蘭嘅。哦，我頭先想行嚟就係呢個啦，呢個位啊，好近就去翻你船喺後邊。
有型喎，似人。
Quando devo fare mangiare qua all'aperto, mese il cibo in
Se vai al ristorante non è perché...
Io guardo che si vedeva ma io
On your right, the tourist boat.
旅遊中心。哇！加雞啊！
Vous allez voir allons maintenant sur le marché au poisson. Des petits légumes de la dame.
哇，幾多嘢買！我椰汁買。
On your right, the fish market of Ladakh decides that the fishermen in the island used to sell their oil directly from the fishing boat net to the food and vegetables market.
轉翻兩條上船子嚟嘅。眼燈啊，細佬！好大斤味啊！哇！第一次見咁大個魚啊！佢會唔會即刻開咗啲蝦嚟整嚟食？哇！真係成條買啊！哇！你幾多？哇！真係離譜，犀利啊！
我哋就咁攞咗錢。
係啊，成條清水唔買啊！
放啲大條㗎。
生魚板嘢係咁冚啊！
哇！有咩魚啊佢？幫到長啊！
揾魚食啊！揾魚食啊！而家揾間嘢有魚食先。
啲鋪頭實有啦，啲嘢停咗喺度。
Avec le tissu madras. On your right, the handicraft market. You can find there. The building on your right, the district residence, is one of the oldest buildings in the city.
但係佢食市場兩個將裏邊先可以揾到魚食啊，係咪食啊？應該有。
係戲院嚟㗎，依家。theatre 咩？仲有咩啊？
咩謀殺論？
Si vous jetez un coup d'œil sur votre gauche, vous pourrez apercevoir le buste de Félix Sébré, qui était le premier gouverneur noir d'une colonie française de 1936 à 1968.
係啊，咁好㗎，啲車速唔快咯。但佢冇高速公路喎。
不如使啫，係啦，唔使啊。
而家好似話冇得。
係咯，啲人咁慢，唔係揸做咩嘢？哇！呢間咧，松木都緊要。我好中意用木。
Sur votre gauche, l'église Saint-Paul-Saint-Pierre. Cette église fut reconstruite en 1847 après le tremblement de terre qui l'avait détruite en 1843. La ville de Pointe-à-Pitre a restauré cette église. Maintenant, elle est considérée comme un monument historique. On your left, St. Paul and St. Pierre Church. It was built in 1847, following the earthquake in 18...
OK。
媽咪話我呢度買嗰啲香港買唔到嘅法國嘢。
唔知4成定幾多成啊？如果我冇記。
落星牌啊！點解？
日本仔鋪頭啊！
識做。
Nous approchons maintenant la route Thébault, qui est la principale route commerçante de la ville. Vous y trouverez les magasins de chaussures, de vêtements, les bijouteries, les parfumeries, ainsi que les magasins de souvenirs. In the city, absolutely everything you care to buy can be found here. Luxury items, jewels, perfumers, designers' clothes, souvenirs, and so on.
呢度個個人都着法國嘢咁樣啊！
出嚟香港。
都係講
香港着白色嘅冇嘛？係喎，即係一對法國鞋走喎，睇到你，真係點樣？即係唔係啊？你唔好話又難怪呢度啲人懶嘅，真係好鬼掂嘅。
哇！又有得買，要薯條啊！
多農莊佢啲係農莊嘅啫嘛，北京農莊好好用啊，小商係好啊，
啱啱嚟啊呢度。
Arrête si vous voulez descendre du train, c'est le moment. Autrement, nous retournons au même départ. Now we are getting to the Christ market. This market is colorful and noisy. The train is going to stop. If you want to set up the train for your shopping, it's the moment. Otherwise, we are coming back to the port.
On this beautiful day, on this beautiful island, go to a beautiful place over there, just to the south behind you. That's where we're going to. We are here now. We go all around like this, the coast along to the south. And this is also a very nice spot, View 4, that's the ultimate south. Normal we go to the right, but an extra stop here is a very nice viewing point on the sand. And then we go to Basse-Terre, to the capital, and up in the hills, St. Claude, to the volcano. And I did a first tour this morning with people from your ship, the Rijndam, the Dutch ship. And I'm also glad there are some Dutch ships coming in Guadeloupe. And I'm Dutch, I'm from Holland. Yeah. And I do this job for years already, and I do it with much pleasure. I like this island very much. I know this part of it as an island, south of Guadeloupe. You have Guadeloupe, and then Dominica, and then Martinique, and then St. Lucia. And so Martinique is also belonging to France, also a French overseas department. And Martinique and Guadeloupe are one of the richest islands in the in the Les Antilles. Advantage that we are receiving from France, from the motherland, a lot of money, more than 5 billion francs a year. We have 2 local governments here in Guadeloupe, the Conseil Régional and the Conseil Général. Conseil means council, and they have also this kind of government, and they are receiving this big amount of money to construct schools and roads and infrastructure and airport, etc. And so you will see today, when you look around, also the road system is a very modern and very developed road system here in Guadeloupe, and it was also fantastic. Very good view. The year was very. You see that the small. You see that the highest point. That's the smoke is coming out of the volcano. You see that? Aha! That's a good sign. Maybe there's a small eruption today, this afternoon, 4 o'clock. This whole area, and also the northeast of Grande Terre, and also nearly the whole island of Marie-Galante. That's one big sugarcane area. And in a couple of days, the end of the slaves, the black people on the plantations. And the first attempt, they went to Africa, to Zaire. It's now called again République du Congo in Central Africa. And they brought in around 1850 about 6,000 people from Africa, not as slaves but as workers, to Guadeloupe. But it was not enough. We continue the way. So we stop a little bit further on, that's more secure. And then we go out of the bus here for 10 minutes, so you can. Yeah. All these coconuts. You don't find coconut plantations in like in St. Lucia or other islands. Water. And they've also, with the same knife, they split it in 2 halves and they scraps out the meat and you can eat the meat. And that's very normal when you go to... and most of the time these cemeteries are in black or black and white. And the most beautiful one, this is a small one, is here in Mornalo. When you come back here, Mornalo. Morn means hill. So just in the center of Grande Terre, there's one of the very nice area here, Trois-Rivières. And the beaches here, there's somebody asked me about beaches and the possibility of the beach. Grande Terre, that's mostly white and yellow sand beaches. The north of Basse-Terre also, and here you have grey, brown and black sand beaches. For Dutch, the name Penda-Pitre, that was a Peter, it was a Dutchman who came here in the 16th century from Brazil, and he got a permission to settle down just where your ship is, in Penda-Pitre. And for that streets, and you'll see a very lot of old houses. And sometimes when you look at these old wooden houses, these small houses, you could have the impression that these people are very, very poor. And of course there are poor people living here, like in New York, like in Amsterdam, like everywhere. But it's not to compare with Haiti or some countries in Central or South America. Having each month a certain amount of money, depending on the status, married or unmarried, children or not children, from the French government. So real poor people dying from hunger, that's impossible here. And even in the small houses, they have water of current water. Yeah, of pigeons, a very big, beautiful collection of insects. We have also the biggest insect in the world, 17 centimeters big. A lot of hummingbirds.
Hummingbird.
Oh my God, I'm not a specialist. If I knew everything. No, the most harmful are mosquitoes, but they are harmful all over the world. But here it's also, we have mosquitoes here, it's a warm, humid climate. But they, in every village and town, every week, always a small aeroplane, always a small truck. They are spend 10 minutes about, and then we go together. These 3 buses are always together with the rain dam. And then we go. This is a very small beach, and in the north you have very big beaches. On this side also very big beaches, but you have a big choice of all kind of different beaches.
多明尼加共和國島嚟嘅嗰度。
者上車嚟瞓覺。
嗰邊嗰個島咯，有嗰啲船就係過去嗰邊㗎啦。
做咩過？咁長。
Yeah.
City. That's really the original Guadeloupe as it was for a part in the last century. A lot of wooden houses, very nice. And also, for example, a lot of new houses and all Guadeloupe, not only here but everywhere, they are constructing it. But as you notice until now, it's a very developed island.
The Arabian side.
Call it. Yeah. You see that grey brown? That's the fortification we're going to. The Fort Algres. And that's a very nice place. I would like to go there. And there we stay for about 1 hour. It depends a little bit on your condition then. It's a very big fortification. You can walk around. And there are also toilets. That's a very important message. It's then we entering not in the head entrance, then we have a special entrance from the backside. And so we enter from the backside and then you go up, and when you are on the small hill you see the rest of the buildings in front of you. And you see the head entrance just below in front of you, and just to the right there are toilets. That's very important to say. But I explained it now to you, but that's my experience. I can be together, get the group together then. Vacation Delgres. So he bought a 4th floor house, and that was the beginning of this fortification. And this guy was so rich, this Charouel, he bought even in 1643, he bought Guadeloupe, the whole island, for 60,000 pounds of tobacco. At the time they were also going to, you can imagine that? It was really a good trade there. And the English arrived and they attacked this fortification, so it was fortified, more fortified and extended, and now it's kind of up. Yes. And they also used different materials. You have limestone, you will see, you have also volcanic stone, etc. It's a response. And there was a battle, and it was in this fortification. But the army of the general was the people much more soldiers. Okay. Maybe also in the fortification, sometimes it happens also, you see. They're quite big lizards. And so he flew into a secret tunnel, and then he went up to St. Claude here in the mountain, just near to the volcano, and there he killed himself, he suicided himself with explosives. And that was to resist, to revolt the restoration of the slavery. And from that time
nice. Weather is nice, beautiful. 係咪呢度啊？你跟埋去睇下啦，唔知啊。屌話人哋參觀啲堡壘啲房嚟咋？
有啊。
係啊係啊，喺度啊！你跟佢入去啊，跟佢入去啊！
有冇分㗎嘛？有冇啊嗰邊？我哋冇啊呢邊。
以前打過仗嗰啲，啊有啊有啊，洗手間你睇住佢。喂，男仔啊，喺嗰邊嘅就淨係得一個咋嚇，你睇住。係啊，入去啦細路。呢個就係古老以前嘅堡壘，係咯。
啲民居嚟嘅，如果咁講。
但係佢會起到一個 fortress 咁啊，好似。
係，即係佢成堆人啊嘛，佢一個即係佢好集中啊，咁啲人入嚟入侵咯，佢咪要。以前幾年之前嗰家父
咩家父乜乜啊？
嗰啲人葬咗喺度。 可以見到下邊嗰個城市。
most of whom you will recognize. However, there may be one or two individuals who will come on out onto the stage to perform for you whom you are not familiar with, but I know you will make them feel at home, won't you? Gentlemen, a big round of applause for Murjana. Come on out here. Have a good show.
Hello everyone. How are you? Did you have a good day in St. Thomas? Good. Well, shopping, right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, tonight is the night, and on behalf of the Indonesian crew on board the magnificent MS Rindam, we would like to welcome you to Indonesian Night. Or in our language we say, Selamat Datang. Selamat Datang is a common word that we use to welcome our guests who come to our country, Indonesia. But what is more important thing behind the word of Selamat Datang? In our spirit of life with no lies, we always welcome our guests with happy faces and smiles. How do you like that? Thank you. Well, so tonight we have a great pleasure to entertain you with a few numbers of our multicultural, such as a folk song, folk dance, a traditional music instrument, a costume and culture that we brought from our homeland. And to you and show you a warm welcome, especially tonight. Ladies and gentlemen, now please welcome Sudipo in Welcome Dance. Well, ladies and gentlemen, Sudipo. Thank you. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, to know and to introduce our country at a glance, tonight we are going to take you far away to the Orient, to the East, to see the sight and sounds of Indonesia. Indonesia, our beloved country, is located between two great continents, Asia and Australia down under, and between two great oceans, South Pacific and Indian Ocean. And nearby, our neighboring Asian countries, such as Philippines, Singapore, Malaysia, Papua New Guinea, and Brunei Darussalam. Indonesia is the biggest archipelago, ladies and gentlemen. Archipelago is a country consists of 1,000 islands. In fact, we have 13,677 islands. It's a big country. So Indonesia is a very good place to play the game. You know what game? Hide and seek. And all of the islands in Indonesia separate out from west to east, just like from California to Massachusetts. It's about 3,200 miles long. And then from north to south, just like from Chicago to Florida, it's about 1,100 miles wide. And the total land area is about 2 million kilometers square or 7,800 square miles. Lovely as big as Mexico. Well, ladies and gentlemen, the next number will be a song. This song is very popular in 1960s in Indonesia, and we arrange a little bit lyric and rhythm to make it nice, and will be sang by Yuda from the control department. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Yuda and Why Do You Love Me?
I found you there to brighten my heart, reveal such sweet memory, and you always there beside me. The time has gone, we just drift away. Until here in my mind, I just can't wait till my love will come. Why do you love me so sweet and tenderly? Oh, 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 oh.
Ladies and gentlemen, Yuda. Thank you. We have tropical climate with high humidity. The temperature ranging from 68 to 85 degrees Fahrenheit with a humidity around 60 to 90%. Just hot like in here in the Caribbean. And in Indonesia we have only 2 seasons, wet and dry. Is that nice? No winter, no snow, just wet and dry. Wet is a rainy season and dry is dry. And the rainy season we have between October to April, and the dry season between April to October. And one of the islands in Indonesia called Bali. And most of you still got to think that Bali is independent country like Tahiti. In fact, Bali is a small island belong to Republic of Indonesia. And for the time being, Bali is a central part of art and tourism in Indonesia. And tonight, ladies and gentlemen, from Bali, we are going to present to you a very famous dance which we call Kecak dance. This dance is telling you about the 2 wonderful powers between Greek and
Ilo ayu niki keliwat jegeng niki.
Putri Ladies and gentlemen, kecap dancers from Bali.
Thank you.
Di satu senja di musim yang lalu, ketika itu hujan rintik terbinar pelangi, lalu engkau tersenyum. Ku menyesali diri, ku ingin membalut luka hatimu dengan mengusap titik air mata.
He's professor of astronomy at Tufts University in Medford, Massachusetts. It's one of those other Ivy League schools up there in the Boston area. Ken is a very well-known and prominent astrophysicist, and he's written a number of popular level books that have become very well-known, and he even won a prize for a French translation of one of his books called Wanderers in Space, Exploration and Discovery in the Solar System. Ken is going to talk to us today about solving the sun's mysteries with the Solar and Heliospheric Observatory. We'll do our best to hold it to 45 minutes and give you ample time for questions and answers, but if it's really going great guns and we use up our time, please remember, you will have many, many more opportunities to ask questions of all the staff. So without further ado, Ken Lang. Do we need help turning on the mic?